Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Rebellious Wellness Lifestyle. Today, my guest is Amy Shaw, and we're going to talk about dementia in probably a different way than you have conversations about dementia. I think it's one of those things most of us fear getting dementia. And I know there are many varieties on the spectrum of that, but Amy is an expert in helping caregivers and organizations that train caregivers in the ins and outs of dementia patient care. And I was fascinated to read all your stuff. Amy, welcome. I'm really happy to have you.
Thank you so much. What an honor to join you in this
Oh,
conversation.
thanks. And let me mention to the listeners right away that your website is called betterdementia.com in case they want to jot that down or take a look at that. Why don't you tell us, from wedding photographer to dementia expert, how did we get here, Amy?
Yeah, I think my journey has really come full circle because before I was a wedding photographer, I studied primate cognition.
Well,
That's what I did
then.
as an undergrad. I was always fascinated with the human brain, child development, language. Our human brain is really the crown jewel, right, of human evolution. And it is a masterpiece, and it's so complicated. And so I studied that as an undergrad, realized very quickly that I'm too much of a people person to be sitting in a lab doing
Uh,
research.
yeah.
And so I became a wedding photographer for about 10 years. And I always say that job was the best preparation for the work that I do now.
Really?
Yeah, because weddings, right? Births, weddings, and the end of life are milestone moments for
Mm.
families. They are a full family affair
Yeah.
with lots of expectations and varied understandings and financial stressors and complicated logistics, you name it, right? It's a full family and it's extensive. People get engaged, they have an engagement party, they have bachelorette parties, etc. And then they do all this planning, which is logistically stressful. It involves multiple generations, and then the wedding day. And my job was to be a guide and almost like a bodyguard, right? To shelter the couple from the stressors of things that invariably go awry on
Mhm.
a wedding day. And then afterwards to help them build their wedding album so they have this wonderful memento to share over the years. And when I got into medicine, I initially worked in urgent care and then cardiology. And then I got into this field called palliative medicine. I didn't even know what that was before I shadowed the outgoing provider for a couple of afternoons and realized, oh, it's talking with people. I can do that. And when you meet people where they are and really ask them what's important to them, you can really help guide them through some of life's most challenging milestones. And in that work in palliative medicine, very quickly, I realized that our medical system is really missing the forest for the trees and
Mm.
often the elephant in the room, the signs of disease progression and the approach of the end of life. And this is particularly true for people experiencing the dementia journey. This journey is almost uniquely built to be missed by our medical model. Our medical system is structured around the patient and the clinician, and it assumes and demands and depends on that patient having intact cognition,
Mm.
right? Being able to reliably remember, report, and advocate on their own behalf.
Mm.
And by definition, and particularly with the Alzheimer's disease journey and the way it impacts a particular neural network in the brain that is responsible for retaining new bits of information, dementia, by definition, from the start, disrupts that cognitive capability. And yet, humans, right, we are social creatures. We need to experience connection and the sense that we are successful in a social engagement. And so, for reasons that I teach extensively, and really that becomes the framework for helping caregivers to adapt to this journey, there are reasons that people will sit in a clinic office with a physician and answer questions inaccurately, but in a way that makes it look like everything is fine. And it's really a unique aspect of this set of diagnoses dementia, right, is a large umbrella term of different
Yeah.
diagnostic journeys, but it follows a pattern for most people. And when the patient is unrecognized by the medical system as having dementia, often for years, it is the family at home that struggles in the confusing moments of memory failure or daily task dysfunction. And it is not intuitive in the same way that, for instance, supporting a child that is growing up is very intuitive. You
Hmm.
know better than to give the keys to the car to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Saying that out loud is ridiculous, sounds ridiculous. But the task for caregivers of a loved one with dementia is strikingly similar to what we do to support children when they're growing up. But the task and the journey is in reverse because we
Mm.
are losing cognitive sophistication on the dementia journey. That is very unsettling for caregivers at home when they don't understand what, when, and why it is happening. And so my background in primate cognition, human development, language acquisition, and wedding photography allowed me to see that there's a huge gap between what families understand at home, what the medical system recognizes in a diagnosis, and then how we support caregivers on this journey.
Mm.
And the most important aspect is that we humans, we love to live in the why. Our brains
Yeah.
are sense makers, right? That is its primary task, making sense of what we are experiencing. And caregivers do this unwittingly. They make sense of the things that they see and experience at home. And often, because they are not taught what is happening, what is breaking in the brain, why things are fluctuating from day to day, and why failures show up in conversations and in daily living tasks, they still make sense. And the way that they make sense shows up in my conversations with caregivers. They often say things like, my person is lying to me.
Mm.
They're manipulating me. They are doing things that are deceitful. And that is the caregiver's brain making sense of their reality.
Mm.
And in the absence of accurate understanding of what is really happening, we still make sense. And that often makes the loved one with dementia the bad guy.
Hmm.
And when that happens, caregivers, I talk about this caregiver backpack, this invisible, heavy backpack that caregiving on the dementia journey comes with, heavy emotional burdens or bricks like grief and bereavement, loss, frustration, anger, resentment,
Hmm.
right? These are really hard emotional experiences for caregivers to carry with them. Imagine you have to live with someone, you have to help them through their day, you have to step in and manage tasks to keep a loved one safe on this journey. And at the same time, you are walking through life with this belief that the person that you love and maybe you have been married to for 60 something years is lying to you. That is such a heavy burden for a
Mm.
caregiver to struggle with. And when caregivers are taught what is happening, what is likely to happen next, why these changes are happening, and importantly, communication strategies and ways to align with the reality of this journey, they can let go of some, not all, because I definitely don't want to minimize this and make people feel gaslit. Oh, this is suddenly going to become this easy journey. It's not. But there are some aspects of when caregivers don't understand what's happening that they unnecessarily suffer. That doesn't have to happen. And that is why I named my business, the book that I'm writing that will be coming out next year, and the online course that I make available for caregivers, Better Dementia. Because this journey does not have to be one marked by loss only, by confusion primarily. It really can be a better experience for everyone when caregivers are scaffolded with a framework for understanding the biology and the pathophysiology, the changes that are happening at a neurological level, so that when they see the reality in the day-to-day nitty-gritty of how a person makes a sandwich, how
Mm,
they find the spoon in the drawer, or if their shoes match when they put them on, that they will be able to understand that through a lens of compassion
mm,
instead of judgment and confusion.
mm.
It really can be a better journey for everyone when we have an accurate understanding as our structural framework.
Yeah, and that speaks to something that is on your website. You ask a bunch of questions. Does this sound like, what you're experiencing? Something reasoning no longer works? Is this normal aging? Where are we on the journey? And then you say dementia is not random and it follows a pattern. I think that alone would be good news for a lot of caregivers because I know from people that have had this experience as a caregiver, they just feel like anything could happen at any moment. They have no control, and it's just a battlefield in a way.
Absolutely. That is the unfortunate reality that because we, the medical community, we focus primarily in diagnostics and treatment, right? But the real work of medicine is in helping people understand what is happening and how to align their life experience with the reality of their disease. And so my work is to fill in that absence, in that gap. And dementia is absolutely characterized by predictable changes that when caregivers are taught these major domains of cognitive function that underpin major aspects of daily function. It is not rocket science, actually. The brain is very complicated
Yeah.
and neurologically sophisticated, but it is not rocket science. And the language and the way that I teach the staging system, I have simplified it into 4 stages that caregivers can easily recognize at home. In fact, when I work with families, right up front, I begin with education. First, I start with their experience and I
Classic.
listen to the complicated journey that they've had, often for 5, 8 years. I'm listening for the pain points, the confusion, the lack of understanding, so that then when I provide the educational framework that I teach, I can touch on and fill in all of those gaps. And when I get to the staging structure that I teach, caregivers are the ones that say, oh, that's where my person is. It's very easy, actually, to recognize where a loved one is in their dementia journey when you understand the major regions of brain function and what those regions are responsible for, how breakdown in those regions neurologically, right at the cell level, show up in the loss of our communication abilities and the loss of our abilities to manage ourselves across the day. And then what I teach caregivers is how to work back from behavior to brain as a cognitive detective so that they can work to adapt and align to the reality that is in front of them. Because every caregiver I've ever met is animated by the same loving goal, which is to support their loved one's well-being and dignity. They want what is best for their loved one. They want their loved one to feel dignified and loved on this journey. And what I tell people is that dementia may rob your loved one of their skills and abilities, but it will never take away their humanity. And if we learn how to understand the brain's purpose, some of the fundamental aspects of our human nature and our human development that allows us to live in the world, then we caregivers can adapt with a compassionate approach that is actually very effective. And when this happens, the stress level at home comes way down. Instead of beating your head against the wall of the disease, caregivers can learn to work with what is happening so that they can ensure that not only their loved one has a better experience, but that they too have an experience that is marked by love and connection.
Hmm. I think I saw something on the page for your course about helping the caregiver understand when to seek help and what is hospice versus home care versus. So you want to explain a little bit
Yeah,
about that?
absolutely. So my course teaches everything that caregivers need to understand to navigate this journey effectively. It is a roadmap. right? This is a very confusing, complicated, ever-changing journey. And it is as though we are dropped from an airplane into this landscape, and nobody has given us a compass or a map or even a destination, right? And so caregivers often come into this journey when they hear the word dementia. It is heavily laden with fear, with a lot of misconceptions. If they've seen a grandparent from 30 or 40 years ago experience what at that time was called senility, time we didn't have really any medications to manage psychiatric symptoms. So they might have seen a grandparent get aggressive
Hmm.
verbally or physically. And then that plants a seed of expectation. That's how dementia is going to be. And I hear a lot of people say they're not at the stage where they're getting mean. And so I want to make sense of this journey in a way that also gives caregivers a lot of comfort in the fact that everyone's journey is unique. There are hallmarks and milestones that are common. There are psychiatric symptoms that can occur, but not everybody experiences dementia in the same way. So that can be very comforting, first of all. I teach the stages, as I've mentioned before, with what is breaking in the brain, how that shows up in our daily life, and then how to adapt our communication and supports to align with that loved one so that they can still feel what I call competent, capable, and in control. We all need that. And then I teach the psychiatric symptoms. This is a big area of confusion, not only in the lay people's world where they may not understand what a hallucination is, et cetera. But the medical community really struggles to understand these psychiatric symptoms in the setting of dementia. There are a lot of misconceptions about when, why they happen. So I help make sense of the severity levels, the medication management options available for them so that caregivers have some medical grounding for when they need to communicate, hey, this is happening at home, this looks like this. Could we talk about a medication such as to help with this? This is not medical guidance specifically for a patient and family, but it does provide some structure and understanding for caregivers so that they're empowered in the conversations that they will need to have. I also try to alleviate some of the fears about the medications because these are very important tools that many people with dementia need to help settle the neurochemistry in their brain so that they're not suffering, because that is really what psychiatric symptoms are. It's a reflection of suffering. And then, just as you mentioned, caregivers go through an experience on this journey where needs to support this loved one increase over time. And we all have our own capabilities financially, physically, spiritually. And so caregivers need to also understand what are the options in their community: home health care, home care agency support, and at the end of the journey, hospice. And just like the word dementia, hospice is very laden. A lot of times people have a lot of misconceptions about what it is, what it means, and I really try to reduce the fear about hospice. I also lead caregivers through the same questions so that they can ponder their values and their loved ones' values that I would ask caregivers that I work with privately so that they can investigate their values and wishes for their loved one in whatever time they have left. The other important thing for caregivers to understand is that dementia is also a medical journey.
Mm.
And so the later stages of this disease are characterized by many different changes in the physical body.
Mm.
And so I provide that medical grounding so that things that happen, caregivers can be, they can be prepared to
Mhm.
make decisions outside of a crisis. Having the chance at home when you're not stressed out, when particularly when you're not in the emergency room, right? Thinking about what you might have to decide for a loved one is a much easier task. It's never easy to make decisions, medical decisions for someone else, but the best medical decisions for someone else come out of moments when you can sit with your own values and understand who this person that you love is and what they would have wanted for themselves. And so that when time comes for making decisions about, do we want CPR? Would we want to go back to the hospital from this point anymore? Is it time for hospice? Those decisions can come naturally, and they can come out of a sense that I'm really doing what's right for my loved one.
Do you have any suggestions or I would say recommendations for the caregivers to seek their own support outside of the home, outside of caring for them? Because I know they have so much stress and they have many times other responsibilities besides this one. It seems like a perfect place for
Yeah.
somebody to get a support of a therapist or a coach or something.
Absolutely. The caregiving journey is so laden with all of those emotional bricks. And we are spiritual, emotional beings
Hmm.
too. Part of our brain development is how do we read the room and align emotionally with other people? And this caregiving journey starts very early. And eventually, this relationship that once was bidirectional becomes very unidirectional. And that layers on the loss of a relationship, often the loss of empathy. Caregivers tell me sometimes that they don't ever hear their loved ones say thank you.
Mm,
That's because that's a part of brain development that is unraveling, right?
mm.
And so, yes, self-care, and I know that's this hot topic, sort of 90s wellness term, but I don't mean it in that sense that you need to go get a massage or get your nails done. Everyone's self-care, which is the way they fill their cup so that they can be less reactive, so that they can move from intention and compassion rather than reactivity, and so that they can feel whole as a human spiritual being is different, right? My self care looks very different, likely to yours. And the dementia journey becomes a caregiving journey much earlier than anyone expects, the medical community as well. And for that reason, caregivers really need to take good care of themselves. It is very isolating because it becomes a caregiving journey early on. A lot of people are taking care of a loved one with dementia, even probably neighbors on a block, right?
Mm.
And yet it feels so incredibly isolating. So, whatever that is for you, if it's meeting with friends for coffee and you need to make sure those friends are ones that support you and aren't interjecting judgment, healthy boundaries is something I write about in my book. What is right for someone else is not necessarily right for you. I had a caregiver recently tell me who is contemplating moving their loved one into a care facility. Probably the hardest decision that caregivers are faced
I'll
with on
bet.
this journey.
Yeah.
And I work with families to make that transition successful because if you don't do it in the right way, if you don't approach it conversationally and logistically in the right way, you can end up the bad guy. That
Mhm.
happens a lot. And once those neural networks and loops get started, it's really hard to undo that. So it's
Mm.
best to avoid that from the start. Well, this caregiver was telling me that he was meeting with some friends, and somebody just casually mentioned who is also taking care of a loved one at home. Oh, I could never do that. I told my parent I would never do that. And then he felt guilty. He felt bad for even considering handling his own experience according to his own needs. So I always say to people, there's no right way, only the way that's right for you. What is right for somebody else is not necessarily right for you. And their needs are not necessarily your needs. I always joke and tell my husband, you're only going to get about 3 dinners out of me. Sign up for long-term care insurance
Huh,
because, like my mom, I'm not the cook.
funny.
And everybody know thyself. Isn't that one of the oldest adages in human civilization? You need to know yourself and you need to know what fills your cup, what touches your humanity and makes you feel. And I don't know that caregivers on this exhausting journey could ever be feeling completely whole, but
Right.
it's okay if going to a movie and having a home care person sit with your loved one for a couple of hours is what your self-care is.
Yeah.
Going for a walk. taking a bath. I don't know. Everyone has their own needs. Talk therapy is very cathartic. I know the families that I work with privately from month to month, this is a space for us to do much of this sense making,
Mhm.
right? To unburden them of their unintentionally misaligned sense making with this journey. And it
Yeah.
is most of what I do anymore is family therapy.
Talk them down, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I know we have a shortage of all kinds of care people in the
Yeah.
world, and I know that you work with corporations. Are there corporations looking to include this specific kind of home care, or do you work with companies more that already have this and they just want to make sure their people are fully trained?
So my education fills a gap for professional caregivers and family caregivers.
Right.
My course is available for home care agencies, memory care facilities, nursing home facilities, any organization that is supporting caregivers. Currently, one, I think it's something like, oh, I'm forgetting the statistic right this second. An immense number of employees, I think it's 1 in 5 working adults, is also caring specifically for someone with dementia.
Wow.
So this is touching workforces across the globe. And my educational system is structured in a way that allows anyone who is interfacing with someone with dementia to understand this journey so that they can adapt to it really in a way that makes common sense at the end of the day.
Mhm.
When they hear the things that I teach, it's like a light bulb went off because it's actually much more commonsensical. And the truth is that family caregivers learn these lessons often the hard way, right?
Yeah.
Through trial and error. They get to the realizations. They may not have the specific language that I put it in or the neurology or biology, but they eventually will get there because most people don't want to struggle endlessly. But my course helps organizations who are supporting people with dementia to get there much quicker.
And I'm thinking that if I were looking for somebody to come in and part-time, whatever, there would be certain kinds of questions I would have to ask because not every home care aide is necessarily a dementia care aide, right?
Absolutely. You're 100% right. Yes. So families reaching out to home care agencies are best served by those that are trained in the dementia journey. That is really important because the conversational strategies, the approaches to helping people through their daily living tasks need a different approach in the setting of dementia. And not just in the setting of dementia, in the setting of dementia at what stage that person is in,
Right.
right? Because our communication and support strategies need to evolve with our loved ones' evolving cognitive capacity. And that is what is really confusing to caregivers when they see the staging systems, for instance, that talk about mild, moderate, and severe. That is a very vague way to explain this disease. And like we said much earlier in this conversation, that caregivers can read a lot of things online and still be left with the question of where is my person in this journey and how
Mhm.
do I support them appropriately? And so the staging and communication strategy and support system that I am creating is aligned with these major milestones of the dementia journey. Home care supports, or even home health care, right? These are physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists. Their approach to supporting a person with dementia also must align with where that person is in their journey.
I think you need to educate everybody because it seems like such a common thing. So we talked at the very beginning. So dementia is not one thing. It's like a spectrum of diseases, Lewy body,
Yeah,
there's all these different ones. And it doesn't necessarily mean Alzheimer's either. I think people hear
right.
dementia and they immediately think, oh my gosh, Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
but you could progress from dementia into Alzheimer's.
Dementia is the umbrella term. It's like
Okay.
saying I have a broken arm.
Okay.
My broken arm could be because I fell off a ladder, or I have an infection, or I have a tumor in there. there are many different causes for a broken bone. And in dementia, which is just the umbrella term for these changes, what I call brain failure, right? Just like your heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys can fail, so too can the organ of the brain. There are many different causes for that failure. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause. So,
Okay,
understanding
got it.
Alzheimer's disease, which affects about 60 to 80% of people with a diagnosis, is really important for caregivers. Because if you understand the framework for how Alzheimer's progresses, you really have the framework for understanding how dementia in general progresses.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
had this in-depth conversation about the brain and this, how it breaks down like there's a pattern. I don't, that's just fascinating. What do you want to add to the conversation that I haven't thought to ask you?
I just want to leave caregivers with this message that if you are helping a loved one through a dementia journey, you're doing an amazing job. And you probably haven't heard that. And your loved one is really fortunate to have you looking out for them in the way that you are. This is not an intuitive journey. It is complicated. It fluctuates from minute to minute, hour to hour, and day to day. It changes over time. And your job is incredibly important and also complicated.
Hmm.
And so, if you haven't heard, because most caregivers that I've worked with have never heard somebody say that they're doing a good job and that their loved one is fortunate to have them looking out for them, please hear that from me because that is the reality. Our loved ones with dementia are making it through their journeys because of the support from other people, whether it's family members, a spouse, children who often don't live in the same city or state where their
Hmm.
parents, or neighborhood friends or relatives or neighbors. And it's such an important aspect of this journey that the caregiving journey be recognized for what it is. Dementia becomes a caregiving journey from the get-go. And so, caregivers who may feel that they're not doing enough or that they're not doing it right or any in between, they should give themselves some self compassion. There's no expectation for perfection on this journey, and that you are doing an incredible job to support somebody, and they're very fortunate to have you looking out for them.
That's beautiful. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that. And I am looking forward to your book coming out because not everybody, as a caregiver, would have time to take the course. But the book, you can
Yes,
always, sneak in a few pages when you're sitting down to relax. And when did
absolutely.
you tell me you thought that might be out?
That will be out next year in
Okay,
2027.
next year. All right.
But
Well,
right now, my course is available, and I purposefully created it with the busy caregiver in mind.
okay.
No lesson part is longer than 20 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
And if you're like me and you listen at 1.5 speed, it can be
Don't
10.
tell my instructors in the course I'm taking, but yes, we love one and a
Right.
half speed. Okay,
Yes.
people, it is betterdementia.com. There's a blog there, and there's more about Amy working with her. And you do work with people one-on-one, as you've been mentioning.
I do.
Yeah, so
Yes, I work privately with families. If they want the education personally from me, I can help them understand what is happening in their specific journey. And I work with a limited number of families privately. And my course is available. And I also want to encourage people to sign up for my newsletter.
that's right.
Newsletter.
I've got the
Right.
newsletter.
Right.
All right, Amy, thank you so much for all
Yeah.
this. Has been really informative, and you make it all sound so doable, manageable.
Wonderful. That's my goal. Thank you so much. This was an honor and a pleasure to be on your
Oh, you're welcome.
podcast. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
peeps, I'll be back next week with another fabulous guest. Be well till then.